So I'm going to be talking about what happens when you start a new taxonomy job. So obviously taxonomy is quite an important part of the overall suite of things that we do within information architecture to try and make the world better. And I've been doing it for a really long time, as Mike kindly said. So a little bit about me. I've spent my whole career architecting information, specialising in taxonomy, design and development. My very first job, I started out working in Shoreditch on the cusp of the first .com boom. Anybody remember Nathan Barley from back in the day? Yeah, there was an awful lot of people like that around that turn of the century. So I started out doing index and cataloguing, but almost exactly a decade ago I decided to go freelance after being sort of permanently employed, and I've never looked back. I feel like I've never had the same job title twice, I've never done the same project twice, except maybe at the BBC. I do assignments for people that range from between 1.5 days, that's my shortest ever job. It was meant to be that short, I wasn't fired. Right up to 5 years working on very long digital transformation projects. I've always been driven by the same basic desire to help people, whether they're customers, whether they're internal staff, whether they're specialists who consume and process information. I want to help people use data and content and information, which we're always told there's so much of in the world now, to do something useful. So through my work in taxonomies, I've helped people discover exciting new restaurants, find that dull policy document that they really, really need to do that job, find great TV and radio to watch, or just to get their work done more efficiently, just to make their lives a little bit easier. So these are some of the people I've worked for. I've also worked for some charities and government agencies that don't like me using their logos, but that's... So, great, you've got a new taxonomy job, now what? So I really recommend a book called Steal Like an Artist. Does anyone know it? Yes, there's some good nods there. By Austin Kleon, and it's a fantastic manifesto for being creative, and that's all sorts of creative. I don't consider myself creative in terms of, I can't draw to save my life, but I'm creative in terms of the digital work that I do, and this book is fantastic. It helps you get things done. And the reason I put that up there is a great quote in there. So anyone that's giving you advice, they're basically talking to themselves in the past, and that's kind of what I'm doing. So I've written this talk to try and, because I would have liked to have had something like this when I started out. I still need this talk because I move around to different jobs, and I've made plenty of mistakes in my career, I've got things right, and I'd really like to help sort of communicate some of that experience to you so that you can approach new projects or jobs with confidence and a real curiosity. And the book cover on the right is, that's a book called The First 90 Days, and that's a really good sort of general book for getting your feet under the table of any job. So I'd recommend that as part of your kind of reading. But I think that being someone working in taxonomy, because it's quite specialist, and I'm still finding years into my career that the level of understanding of it is quite variable within organisations, that it varies from people just don't get it to people want it to do everything. But I think there's some quite particular advice that could be related. And also I think this is just a really exciting time for information architecture and taxonomy. I think there's more opportunities to use our skills than ever before. It's opening up in all sorts of places. I never would have imagined that we could use information architecture in personalised books, but it's obvious now, I've seen it, and that's fantastic. And we need to be ready to dive in and be flexible enough to make the most of it. So, you've started a new job, handover. Now, you might be lucky and start somewhere and there's already someone in post that is there to show you the ropes, take you through everything. But a lot of the time, that isn't the case. In my experience, you might be the only taxonomy person in that organisation, or it might be a new role, or in my case, if I'm a consultant, I might not be that embedded with the team. So you can't always hope that someone is going to sit there with a nice cup of coffee and an enormous handbag and take you through these things. So I think that's just something to kind of be aware of. I think so. The first thing is to try and get hold of as much documentation as you can. If there's already taxonomies, then make sure you've got them. If anything sounds really obvious, don't assume that it is. That I can start a job doing taxonomies and people don't actually show me anything for the first week. So, yeah. It's always useful to look at the job spec that you were hired to. Usually within a month or so I tend to rewrite it because it doesn't actually reflect what I'm doing and what they need from me. But that is useful to have because it's a reference point for what they think they want from you. And your job is to try and shape that and influence it using your skills. It's good to look at the particular application you've been hired to look at, whether it's the website or an enterprise search engine or an intranet or some kind of internal system. So you need to spend time familiarising yourself with what's in that. It's also important to think about the bigger picture. So even if, like in the case of that job I did for 1.5 days, I needed to know what the overall strategy was. Where do I fit into? And in the case of this project, it was a big banking project that's still kind of ongoing. But if you don't understand what they're trying to move to, you're never going to be able to help them take those steps. Another thing that I think is really important in taxonomy work is governance and maintenance and the kind of business side of things. And in my experience is no one is ever happy with how their taxonomies are being maintained. There's either a lot of apathy or there's a lot of politics or people are fighting over what categories are called on a website. And sometimes an organisation will have a beautifully designed flowchart and a big fat process document, but it's just being ignored. So you need to read those documents, but not necessarily get too attached to thinking that's actually how it's going to happen. Also, you have to be aware of the influence of the what's called the HIPPO, the highest paid person's opinion. Yes, a few nods there. We've all worked with a few hippos. But even with the best kind of process documentation in the world, it still might come down to who shouts loudest for what something's called, if you're doing kind of labelling or how something's driven within search. I also find there's a reality gap sometimes within organisations where teams will say, yeah, we really want to maintain our own taxonomies, we don't want to have someone at the centre telling us what to do, and then maybe they're not actually resourced to do it. Maybe there's restructures and those really enthusiastic people move on. And I think it's always good to have that sense of reality and to be pragmatic, that you might not be able to give people the amount of control that they think they want at that point. If they are well resourced, then fantastic. Then I am an advocate for letting people manage their own information assets where possible. Have I lost a slide? Oh, sorry, my slide's in the wrong order, not to worry. So the next thing that's really important in any job, and especially in information architecture, is who are your immediate colleagues, who's got your back in the team. And what I found is that taxonomists can fit into lots of niches within an organisation, and which area, which niche you're in, will probably have quite a big influence on the focus of your work and the interactions that you have and probably battles that you may have to fight. It's good if you've got sort of Jon Snow's army fighting for you. Fantastic. And often you might have kind of matrix management and multiple managers, and you need to work out a way to work with all of them that isn't going to drive you mad trying to keep everybody happy. I think at the moment I'm working with a publisher and I'm really tightly embedded into the technical team, and I have to spend time worrying about servers and is my stuff on Jira up to date, and do I have to attend the daily stand-ups. But actually I was hired to do a strategic role, so that it's causing kind of tensions, and I think taxonomists need to be really, really good diplomats. I think I wish someone had told me that when I started my career, that you can pick up the technical skills, you can pick up design skills, you can use all different tools, but you need to have those kind of business skills to help you navigate these kind of tensions. So I have a lot of fun, but I don't really want to be worrying about my Jira tickets when I'm supposed to be creating a vision for the whole organisation. So that's why I come to places like this to talk to people and share that learning. It's good to work out how does the team you're within interact with other teams. Are they in a silo? Do they have good communication processes? And I would say that I've made a little list of the different types of teams that I've worked with in my career. I've worked in sales teams, lots of technical teams, UX teams that were very heavily focused on visual design, search teams, product teams, and sort of information processing and retrieval teams. So that's why I say this is a really exciting time, that people with our skills can fit in almost anywhere. It's great. So, as I alluded to, if you're in a team, you're going to have lots of different stakeholders, and there's plenty of good resources out there for understanding your stakeholder network, mapping, who needs what, understanding needs and styles and motivations and how best to work with them. But again, I think what I'm trying to communicate is specific to kind of taxonomy and information architecture, because what I think is important is people's attitudes as well as their positions and what deliverables they might need from you, their sort of attitude and understanding. Because in my experience, sometimes the biggest champion, the biggest supporter and help in your work might be a junior developer, or it might be the CEO. And vice versa. Sometimes the developers might hold you up and the CEO is the one that clears the path. And a lot of that depends on their level of interest and how well you can communicate your passion to them. So there's a few different styles, and I would say that none of them are necessarily good or bad, and everyone has different preferences in how they work, but basically I think everybody wants support and everybody wants the space to get on with their jobs, and different styles are going to work differently with different people. So I think if you're lucky enough to have an enthusiast as a stakeholder, that's fantastic. They get it, they might have done it themselves, they've got experience to pass on to you, that's fantastic, or they understand the benefits of what you're doing. These people are great. There's also the flip side of that is the seagull manager that swoops in. They might leave some kind of deposit on you, and then they leave you alone, and you might be sort of pointing your hand up saying, excuse me. That can be frustrating to work with, but you should see that as an opportunity, because that can give you the space to think and to shape things, and actually working with seagull managers will probably make them better in the long run. I've also come across the style that I call the janitor, who is a temporary person. They might be the person who's in charge of me as a consultant, or they might be new to the job, or they might just be looking after something for cover or maternity cover or something, and their focus is elsewhere. They don't really care what you're doing. They probably care that you turn up and do something, but they're not really going to get into the details of it, and they're not going to give you any feedback. And again, like the seagull, it can make you better because you're accepting that you have to drive things, you have to do what you can. If they're too remote, that's a problem. But it can work to your benefit in the long run. Another style I've come across is what I call the reductionist, who doesn't really understand what taxonomies are for, probably makes jokes about taxidermy, which, I've heard them all. Or they say, oh, can't we just get some interns to write the enterprise taxonomy, or we'll just get one of the developers to bang out the taxonomy while he's doing something else. And that always really freaks me out as someone who considers myself a specialist and has the passion for this and gives up my Saturday to talk about it. So it's a bit naughty to include a quote from David Foster Wallace, but from one of his books, I think it's The Pale King, he says, "How odd, I can have all this inside me, and to you it's just words." This is just sometimes what I think when I'm trying to explain the benefits of taxonomy and all the kind of depth and nuance and the power of what it can do and what information architecture is all about. And so if a project manager says to me, "Oh, it's just a bunch of words, can't you just shove it in the database?" That's where those diplomacy skills come in. But again, you can use that to make you better by learning to communicate your passion better. What is it that they care about? They care about delivering a project, or they care about the big picture of the product being delivered. Fine, how do you fit into that? You care about the detail, you can be passionate about the detail, work out, speak their language. And another style is the sort of Wi-Fi toaster guy or girl. That's a toaster that prints the weather forecast on toast. To me, that is a bit sort of unnecessary technology, but some people really, really love that. And that's really, I put that in as a kind of example of people who they have the big picture. They might have the big vision. It might be mad or it might be really sensible. And because I'm quite a detail-oriented person, sometimes I find it a bit of a struggle to kind of get into their universe, and obviously vice versa. So they're probably not going to appreciate the detail of what you do. But again, it's if you're doing something that enables the weather forecast to be printed on a piece of toast, make sure they know that. Make sure that they know the value of it, even if they don't appreciate the particular kind of blood, sweat and tears that need to get there. Another slightly important group for information architecture is your actual users. And the chances are they're not you. Whatever you're working on, it's different people with different interests from you, and that's why we have user-centered design. That's why there's a whole load of different methodologies for doing user-centered design. And in the case of taxonomy, if you're starting a new job, is there any meaningful research that's been done before? Or is it just a big fat report full of pie charts that they paid an agency for, that maybe the CEO really likes it, but does it help you do the job? I've seen too many of those reports and they just get filed away. So I think that's just something to bear in mind. I also come across research that's been done in the past, and anecdotal evidence from that has somehow become the folk consciousness of the organisation, that one little thing that someone says, oh, no one ever clicks 2 levels beyond the home page, or no one searches from this page, and somehow that's just been accepted and it's never been challenged. And I think there's an interesting opportunity if you're starting somewhere new to question that sort of stuff. You might find out that actually it has some kind of grain of truth, like lots of folk memories or old wives' tales, but it's possible actually you could try and change that understanding. And also, is the user research helpful? Have they asked people the right questions? There's that quote from Henry Ford where he said he didn't talk to customers that much because they would never have come up with the idea of the car. They would have just said, build me a better horse. So I think it's important to use your skill as an information architect to dig beyond what you might see in the user research, or if you're actually lucky enough to participate in user research, to try and dig under what people are saying and not necessarily take it at face value, because you might be able to deliver something that way exceeds what they thought, you know, better horse or better product. Some of the greatest innovations were never kind of asked for by customers, they came out of different processes. Yes, I've got a couple of examples of sort of working. I think it's important if you're doing kind of taxonomy and labelling and structural work, not just to focus on the task stuff, but to actually understand when and how and why people would use stuff. So I found this on an intranet revamp that I was doing for a public sector agency, and they've done lots of research saying people think there's too many links on the homepage, they don't like the design, the navigation is awful, but actually what was more useful was trying to understand how the intranet fitted into their work. So there was a lot of frontline workers. Some of these people didn't even have desks, they didn't even have their own computers. They're not going to spend half an hour each day noodling around reading the press releases from the comms team. They just want that really essential piece of information, and then when they go out, do their work, interacting with the public, they're armed to do things properly. And yeah. So something that I'm really tempted to do whenever I start a new job is just to dive in right away. I want to start playing with the taxonomy. If there's a taxonomy tool, I want to start pressing buttons. If I've seen the website, say, before I've actually started in the job, I think, I'm going to change that, and that. And I think it's important just to take that step back. So it's really tempting to want to make an impact and, make your mark. But I do believe in understanding what's gone before, especially as I was saying with the user research. Even if you have a healthy detachment from it, you need to understand why it's there and what people thought. And then if you're working somewhere and they haven't got a taxonomy, so I sometimes find this, that I'm the first person who's done taxonomy somewhere. So the temptation is just to start playing, because that's what I really love doing. I don't know whether it's the same for developers, that if they start a new job they want to start banging away producing code. I think it's a kind of mentality thing. But again, I think it's important just to take that step back, document your progress, document kind of who you've been talking to, and as you get further into the job, you might find that your thinking has completely changed. So obviously the critical part of the taxonomy is the language and the words and the phrases. And especially where I find the tension is what language your users are using versus what language exists within the organisation, or and the organisation is a user as well. So you need to be aware of acronyms, the corporate style, the glossary, if they've got such a thing. If are there any words that are really loaded that you can't use within a labelling structure for whatever reason. People probably say to you, oh yes, we've got plenty of acronyms here, we've got so much jargon, and I wish I had £1 for every time someone had said that to me. But you need to kind of understand all of that as far as possible. Because I think there will always be compromises. You're never going to have a taxonomy that is entirely focused on the user language. Maybe it's possible, maybe I'm just getting a bit sceptical and cynical in my old age, but you always have to find out what those compromises are and what battles are worth fighting. But you can make a difference in these things. So I was working for a very well-established professional body with a big member database, and they were describing the members. They were architects, so they were describing the architects in quite kind of prosaic terms. They sort of say where they worked, what their kind of main areas of expertise, awards, qualifications, that sort of thing. But when we talked to users, what they really wanted was inspirational language, and they wanted to know about specialists and quirky things, and they wanted to know if they wanted to be able to find if they've got a thatched roof in Kent, who's the best person to do that. And they don't want to do loads and loads of searches for architects in Kent who might be good at old buildings, as conservation, same as thatched houses. They wanted something with a bit more pizzazz and stimulation. So we were trying to make that not so much of a phone book, but more of a kind of explorational discovery database. And that's the real value of this kind of work, I think. So helping organisations understand themselves better and to understand their customers better. So where of time? Briefly on kind of tools. So what I mean by this is what you actually use to manage a taxonomy. And two things I would say is please don't use spreadsheets, and number two, please don't use spreadsheets. It's so frustrating because it's not secure, it's difficult to manage polyhierarchy, metadata, workflow, all the standard features of semantics or SCOS, and yet people manage spreadsheets because they think that's all they have. I would say if your organisation is funny about giving you the budget to buy a decent tool, and there's lots of stuff online about taxonomy tools, so I'm not going to make particular recommendations. If they can't stump up for that, buy yourself a copy of Multitrash. It's like £100 for a single user license, and I absolutely love it. The UI is quite old and quaint, but it's absolutely brilliant for doing this really, really detailed taxonomy work, and it's really easy to get the stuff into other systems. Yeah. And that would be my recommendation.
What was that product, please?
Sorry, Multitrash, so multi and then TES, all one word. They don't pay me or anything, but it's just a really cheap tool that you can buy yourself and install on your own laptop, if you're allowed to, by your organisation.
Excuse me, sorry, multi what? The second part I can't.
We're good? Oh, cool, I almost made it on time. So I'd just like to plug, I'm the organiser of a conference called Taxonomy Bootcamp London. We had our first one last year. We had some bloke called Mike Atherton do the opening keynote. He was very good, and we had Matt Hollidge as well talking. And what we're trying to do is to create a real community of people who are interested in this kind of work, whatever sector they're in, whatever how they work, whether they're sort of permanent or contractors, whether they do this all the time, or whether they're just interested, or whether they're developers. So we want to make this really strong community, and it's now our second year. So we're going to be putting out our call for speakers in the next few days, and we are really, really keen to get people from the information architecture community. We've got a broad range of themes that we're interested in. We're very open to other ideas from people. It's a really lovely community. They don't make you get up on a Saturday morning. And we're opening registration later in the year, so I would urge you to sort of look out for that in the next few days on Twitter. That's my Twitter and the conference Twitter. So I hope this has been a helpful brief overview of how to get started in a new taxonomy project. Thank you.